Hello and welcome to Transformations Café, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Café is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to visit our website at theglobaltransformation.org. It's constantly changing and upgrading. And if you would like to learn more about us and join our change makers community, there is a join button at the top of each page. We invite you to select that and take a look. And if you'd like to support our work, including programs like this one, there's also a donate button at the top of each page that will take you straight through to PayPal. So first of all, with format, typically we only feature one guest. Today we are very honored and have the delight of welcoming two guests with us. Both of these people are longtime members of our board of directors, and also contributors to IFGT for many years and in many ways. And with our guests and our live audience, we're going to be discussing a topic we haven't really even touched on, I don't think, much in past programs, which is astrology. And we think we've got some good questions, and that our audience with us and those who will see this later probably share many of these questions. So we are looking forward to providing some answers and exploring this topic with you. And we also want to point out that our guests have been responsible for bringing something new to our IFGT community starting this past January. There's been a new column featured in the monthly newsletter on the subject of astrology that our guests are co-contributing to. So they've each authored 4 of the 8 articles that have been published so far. So we are looking forward to learning more about that as well. And we wanted to explore this in part to see if there's even further interest in this subject, and seeing if IFGT wants to develop even more programs or other resources concerning this subject matter. So I'm going to read some bios so you get a proper introduction of our wonderful guests, and then we'll get into the conversation. Our first guest that I want to introduce is CJ Mulkerrin. CJ is a professional astrologer specializing in esoteric and modern Western astrology, including natal charts, solar return charts, and astrocartography. She's also a practitioner and teacher of Codex, 5th Dimensional Harmonic Astrology, a system that integrates structural harmonics, higher dimensional consciousness, and soul-level attunement through astrological inquiry. A lifelong student of esoteric wisdom, CJ began her journey in the mysteries as a child and has studied extensively within various mystery schools and spiritual lineages. After retiring from a leadership role in a global consulting practice, she returned to her true calling, helping others align with their soul purpose and passion through the lens of astrology and harmonic resonance. And you can contact CJ for more information at astrocj@outlook.com. Our other guest joining us is the girl with a new point of view, Dianne Collins, who is the creator of Quantum Think, the groundbreaking system of thinking, blending scientific insight and spiritual knowledge to attain personal mastery through quantum principles, spiritual connection, and mystical insight applied as practical modern wisdom. She's the 10-time award-winning author of the bestseller, Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World, hailed as a must-read for our changing times. A visionary in new consciousness and world authority in new worldview thinking, Dianne is a popular media guest and trusted consultant to executives, entrepreneurs, students, artists, and celebrities. She's been an avid student of astrology for over 30 years and loves to show people how to benefit from knowledge of the energies of the times. Dianne Collins' wide range of experiences, from receiving teachings of enlightened masters to partying with rock stars, give her a big picture view and authentic connection with people of all ages, cultures, and perspectives. She is a member of the cutting edge exponential technology community Abundance Digital, serves on the board of the Institute for Global Transformation, thank you, and is co-vice chair of the Peace, Harmony, and Joy Alliance. Dianne lives with her husband and business partner, Alan Collins, who has also been a guest on this program. So with that, my friends, CJ and Dianne, welcome to Transformations Cafe. I guess I could say welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here with you always, and with our colleagues and with our community of people who are here to live an enlightened life. So thank you for having us.
You're welcome. And hello again, CJ. Good to see you as always.
Yeah, likewise. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And again, just I want to remind folks that Dianne, we interviewed you about your book a couple years ago now, but that is in our Transformations Cafe playlist if people want to check that previous interview with you out. So to kind of kick things off, why don't we just get both of your perspectives on what astrology is and what it isn't? And CJ, if you want to start.
Okay, sure. So astrology is what I consider to be, and it's been considered a divine science, not just by me, but from the ancient times. Astrology is probably one of the oldest sciences that we know of around in existence. And it's based on your birth chart at the time of, it's based on the day you're born, the time you're born, the place you're born. And the belief in astrology is that when you take your first breath, it sets up your chart, which sets up the dynamics between the planets that are going to be influencing and creating kind of a pattern, but not really a pattern. It sets up your strengths and weaknesses for this lifetime, if you want to take a look at it that way. So, and it's not necessarily like a lot of people thought in the past, that it's predictive, like it's, you're stuck in whatever's predicted within your chart, but that's not really so at all. It's just it's opportunities and challenges, and if you know that along the way, you can use those energies to your benefit. And so that's the purpose of astrology. And I turn it over to Dianne.
Thank you. That was beautifully said, CJ, as usual. I like to add to that I look at astrology as a system. It is a divine science. I also call it a psychic science, because we, in order to interpret, whether it's a reader or ourselves individually, if you're just tuning into it, it does take attunement, especially to our intuitive capabilities that we're born with. But I look at the system as of planetary energies. So I look at it as light energies that are intelligent light energies that have a panoply of each planet and the signs, there's what we call the zodiac that they travel through, and their relationship to one another each one has a complexity of qualities. And so what CJ talked about, the natal chart, the time that we're born, and that can be for anything. It can be for a corporation, it can be for a country, it can be for an individual, that there could be a birth chart that CJ can do for you. And what I wanted to say also is that what we call the transits, the planets, this system of light energies interacting with one another that are always moving, as we know. So as the planets are moving in their orbits, through the different signs of the zodiac, it is affecting us. And I like to think of it as divine source uses the planets to focus our energy. And when I say our energy, I mean as individuals and also collectively as a humanity. And we've all heard the expression, history repeats, patterns repeat. And so it's something like that. But the difference is that when the planets are going through the cycles, it's more like a spiral. So I like to think of it as a spiraling up that is directing the evolution of consciousness. And so even though it affects us, even people who are not familiar with astrology, or we haven't really been given a lot of attention to it in a formal way in our educational system, which I think is paramount right now, that we need to, because it's outside of the realm of our ordinary five senses, except if you're looking, sometimes you can look in the sky and if it's clear, you can see the planets, or obviously through a telescope. So I think that this system is a system of intelligence and energetic shifts that we are always in connection with. And so it's a beautiful system, and it teaches us so much. And as CJ mentioned, you come in with certain tendencies. I look at the chart as your soul blueprint. Your soul chose this to come in. And then that's the destiny part. The free will is what we choose to develop from those given tendencies that are in our chart.
I just want to thank you. I just want to add one more thing about it, because when I was talking about, when we take our first breath in the chart, it's interesting because in astrology, it's considered that the tension between your sun and moon is what impacts or causative for that birth. At that point in time, the tension between your moon and your sun is what you're reacting to when you decide to enter the birth canal. And one other thing that I thought that is interesting is that the sun represents the father, the moon represents the mother.
Forgive me if I missed it, but we also offered to say what astrology is not. Do you have thoughts on that, either of you?
Well, I have thoughts on that. That it's not a parlor game. Remember, some people still say that it's a parlor game, that it's not taken seriously and all that. I mean, it's not that. And I think, as CJ mentioned, it's also not necessarily for making predictions. By the way, I should say that what we're talking about now is Western astrology specifically. So
Dianne, just as I mentioned, as contrasted to what, just in case people don't know.
Vedic astrology, which there's a name for it, probably CJ knows. So, there's Chinese astrology, there's different astrologies, but the two ones that we would hear the most, or if you go on, YouTube and you're listening to different astrologers, they're usually a Western or a Vedic astrologer that comes from the Indian system. And it's a little bit different because they say they look at the actual the location of the planets according to astronomy, and that they feel that Western astrology is a few degrees off. But I don't really know a lot about Vedic astrology. I do listen to it occasionally because I think, well, how do we reconcile these two? This one says this, and this one's 20-something degrees behind. But the interesting thing that I found in tuning into both, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, CJ, is that in terms of the planetary energies, in terms of the vibrational kind of frequency and the direction and the mood of things, they do seem to synchronize. Have you found anything? Well, before I ask you that, CJ, what is it not? It's not an absolute prediction about your birth. You know, my original teacher, she used to say, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but she used to do these groups, and she's a psychic astrologer, an extraordinary clairvoyant. And people would come in and they want to know, you know, how's my relationship going to work out? And she'd say, well, how long have you been living together? And they say, like 6 years. And she'd say, well, don't you know how it's working out?
Yeah.
But so, or she would say, don't worry, I'm not going to do death. Let it be a happy surprise. So it's not about prediction. It's about using and tuning in to the energies, both of the time, that is the collective transits, and of your own individual chart, so that you can work with the energies always are in our objective here, to evolve ourselves, to evolve our consciousness, our souls, and collectively serve one another.
Awesome. That's a great answer. I think that it will be, it's helpful to me, and I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of people that run into this. Anything you want to add to that, CJ? What astrology isn't from your perspective?
Sure, I just want to talk a little bit about it. So Diane mentioned the Chinese astrology and the Vedic astrology and these, and then we had in the Western world what's known as Hellenistic astrology. So we have these astrology practices that are older than what we're currently practicing in the Western side. And the older methods are more predictive, and some of them are pretty good, but you can't look at it as fatalistic. My mentor and probably my first teacher was a woman named Joyce Belmonton. And when she first started doing my chart, she always told me that, because she was an amazing predictive astrologer, totally. And she always told me, if you see something in your chart, if I ever tell you something you don't like or negative or whatever, you start using that energy and planning 3 to 6 months in advance to shift that energy. So, you know, that was a positive use of predictive astrology, but I don't think all astrologers explain it that way or do it that way. And the modern astrology, which is more based on, you know, the psychology, the soul level astrology, this is basically fairly modern. It started around the turn of the century with Carl Jung getting into astrology with his archetypes, and then Dwayne Rudyard, who's considered the father of evolutionary astrology, bringing it more into more of a psychological. Those two people are probably key influencers, and bringing it more into a psychological soul level approach to astrology, which it's more practiced now in the West.
Great information. Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask you, like, how old is astrology? But I guess since there isn't an astrology, that answer is going to vary. But do you have an idea of when people first started referring to this, the planets, the stars?
It's like I said earlier, it's one of the oldest sciences that we
Yeah.
have. We know the ancient Egyptians used it, and now, you know, we know that there's writing inside the king's chamber now, etched on the walls, all the astrological symbols.
True.
So,
Right.
however old the pyramid is, and then Pythagoras was,
Okay.
he predates.
Thanks.
So,
Well, you're more the scholar of it than I am, but I think I've never heard of it going further back than what you mentioned about the Egyptians and the Greeks. So it's that. I mean, when we have to think about when did anything start to be recorded, and that's about as far back as we can go, unless we actually maybe tune in to another dimension and we might see it another way. But I do think that I like what you said, CJ, about it not being fatalistic, but as we both said, there are these tendencies of the energies that you can work with. And I think that is a very it's a very important point, so that people do we have to realize that we always have free will, regardless of what circumstances are sort of thrown our way. And a big aspect of the circumstances thrown our way is what we come in with through the chart.
Yeah, I really want to explore in a bit kind of how these things integrate, because I think that's part of the beauty of it, and also part of the truth of there is some complexity that, it's not we don't live in a single variable world where you get all your answers in one way. And frankly, I think it's a mix, but I want to let you guys talk about that a little bit more. Before we kind of move on to the next general area, I want to ask one more question, and then we have a question from one of our audience members. So just to kind of build on what you've been sharing so far, one of the reasons I believe I understand correctly that both of you decided to partner in this relatively new endeavor to share astrological information through our newsletter monthly is that you bring different perspectives. Could each of you talk just a little bit about what you are intending at least to bring when you submit your contributions to that newsletter? CJ, go ahead.
Great question. So I think astrology is can be used as part of a transformation of consciousness. And here at the Institute, we're all about raising consciousness levels, right? And how do we raise that? And I think being able to bring that perspective into astrology as we share it within our organization is, how do I say, I think it's helping the collective. I think it's just another tool in our toolbox that we can use to help reach that tipping point that we're looking for.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to explore that in more detail too. Dianne, what perspective do you bring?
Well, I like to think of how we use it. So I don't call myself an astrologer. I always look at the charts of clients that have been our Quantum Think clients. A lot of executives, may be surprised, but they're into it and they want me to look at it and, really work it into their lives because, and so I'm like to look at it as how do we use this in a practical, everyday sense? And I want to just bring up one example that I think is very important right now, and that is a sense of purpose. And I know CJ and her work and you spoke about it, helping people through their chart to discover their purpose, because one of the things that you can very much see in a person's chart, and I'm talking about younger people. So we look at it and it doesn't even matter. I think in any era, but particularly right now, we come into life and the big questions: who am I? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing? What's the purpose of existence? And, what should I be doing? And I think there is really a lack of conversation around that topic for people who are growing up now in this very fast-paced, obviously incredibly restructuring, changing world that we live in the outer world. So it becomes even more important to be able to use these tools. So, you know, when we talk about AI, these are tools. And I think any of these divine sciences, whether it's astrology, numerology, human design, whatever it is that you find yourself drawn to, resonating with, that we use these as a tool to really connect to our divinely given purpose, whether it's in collaboration with whatever your soul chose, whether it's, or it's always in collaboration with divine source. So, but to really connect to yourself in a way that you feel like you belong here, that you have significance, that you are every single person, that you are magnificent, in that you have your unique qualities that you have been given, gifts that you have been given. Again, you have the choice to develop them and to bring them to the world or not. But I think through astrology that you can very specifically connect to that, looking at the chart. And you can also see through the transiting planets, which have to do with timing of the period of your life that you're in, you know, should I be paying more attention here, you know, to relationships or to money, or, you know, the main things, as I said, my thing is to look at it practically. So you can, it's a guidance system. It's like your divine GPS. And that's why I think it's so important today, getting back so that people know they have a purpose, that we're all divine beings, that we're all uniquely gifted with what we are here to develop and bring to the world.
Those are, again, wonderfully helpful answers, both of you. Clarifying what I think people now can expect to find when they want to go back and read the articles already published, and then what to look forward to. But both kind of bringing how it fits in with our evolving consciousness individually, collectively, and our spiritual growth, and how then we can use this to get through and maybe make happier, more enjoyable lives, or more productive, or whatever it wants to be in this so-called day-to-day. So that's also a good segue and part of what you were talking about, Dianne, to the question that Michael has put in the chat. And I'm going to read it, and then Michael, if you have any thing to add or correct, but I'll read it verbatim. And the question is, aren't constellations a wide range of sizes? So isn't the sun in some bigger ones, constellations, longer than smaller ones? If that's the case, then therefore, how is it that every month the number of days is more or less equal for each of the zodiac signs?
When you say the constellations are longer, but are you talking about the orbits, like the length?
The size of the constellations, like for example, Lyra, I think it's a musical instrument, is very small. Scorpio, in the sky, it's very small, and Scorpio is huge. It's about, I don't know, at least 5 times bigger than Lyra, or maybe take, because Lyra is not one of the horoscope signs, but in the 12 signs of the zodiac, they're all constellations. They're all different sizes. So the sun is in those constellations. That's your sun sign, the way I understand it. But they're all approximately 1 month each, from around the 21st or the 23rd of every month to the 23rd of every other month. And yet the sun is going to be in the smaller zodiac signs a lot shorter than that same 30 days as the big constellation. So how does that work? always wondered about it because I've studied astronomy, and my experience from studying astrology is that anybody that reads about it and then with an open mind knows what people they know really well, what their sun sign is, because of course we're talking about sun signs, which is just the most powerful energy that we're influenced by, but then there's the moon side and the rising sign, the planets and the houses and all those other things that gets really complicated. But you'll notice that there are common traits of everybody you know, and Alita and I have spoken about this all the time. Every time we talk about somebody in our family or friends or whatever, what's their horoscope? What's their sun sign? Oh yeah, we know they're going to be like this. Primarily, they have certain trends, and it's uncanny how true and accurate it is. So that tells me this is not just some kind of woo-woo nonsense. But how do you answer this issue about the discrepancy of the sizes of the horoscope sign, the constellations that they're related to?
So the calendar, of course, is based on moon cycles. That's where they get this 30-day cycle, right? So it's not really based on the sun, it's based on the moon. And then as far as the signs, I think it's a good question. I can't answer it based on the calendar, but I can answer it based on house systems, right? Because in astrology, there's multiple house systems that you can use, and astrologers, as they go through and they're based on their experience, they kind of pick and choose which house system they want to use. And like Placidus is a house system that doesn't have exactly equal houses, right? It's based on the amount of time the sun is in that sign. Where whole sign houses breaks it up into each sign is given 30 degrees. And so in my experience, it feels like because when you go up to the harmonic level, astrology, the circle that you use for an astrology becomes vectors, not signs. And that's based on each vector being 30 degrees. So those vectors kind of relate to an astrological sign. So that sort of makes sense to me as for me, the 30 degrees makes sense. But in my practice, what I have found out, I use them both. The Placidus, which has the different size houses, is good for more psychological readings. And then the whole sign is probably better for not that I do a lot of prediction, but predictive, knowing when events are going to happen. So that's the best answer I can give you, Michael. I think it's a great question.
So to feed back what you said, according to my interpretation of it, the vectors are what determines those equal number of days for each horoscope sign, not necessarily the time that the sun is in that particular constellation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that makes sense. One other thing that I have, my best friend is a brilliant man who took a course in astronomy at Santa Monica College, and we talked about it quite often because I wanted to be an astronomer myself. And he said, Michael, this whole thing about astrology, it seems like there's something missing because there is a constellation, the 13th constellation in the zodiac, where the sun goes around, that is not even considered in astrology as one of the signs. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, there's Arfucus, which is considered the 13th sign, but really isn't just 13, because what we found out now is that there's actually a 14th sign, or Orion is actually a sign. So, and from my understanding is that they're not used in traditional astrology. In astrology, there's different levels that you can get into in using astrology, and it can be based on somebody's level. I'm going to say level of consciousness for a better word. And so those two signs don't come into play until somebody stepped into a certain level of consciousness.
Oh, fascinating. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, so.
So
Yes.
one last thing, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but one last thing that I'm very curious about that seems to make sense is that no matter what our horoscope is, no matter what the reading of the prediction for whatever future we're looking at, we always have free will. And we can choose based on our behavior and our belief system and our level of consciousness, as you just mentioned, CJ, to, for example, not have something negative happen because we're going in a different direction consciously and by free will. Is that correct? So they're just tendencies that we see in the horoscope. They're not, like I think Dianne mentioned, hardcore predictions that we can't avoid, right?
No, yeah, exactly, because they're all potentialities, right? Because,
Yeah.
like I said, somebody within this lifetime can step upon the next level, right? You can go from aspirant to disciple to master, depending on where you're at with that, and how you read those would depend on those
Thank
levels,
you.
according to the ancient wisdom traditions, anyway.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Great questions as always. Let's go to one of the other topics that we said we would explore, and it is also directly correlated with the decision we made to start featuring this topic, and that is both, I think, sense and data evidenced that there is some growing popularity, perhaps more among younger generations than older, but a popularity of astrology. And so I wondered if you could both comment on, first of all, do you agree with that? And then why you think that is, and what is the nature of the interest, if you can address that too.
There have been so many articles over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years about this growing interest, especially in younger generations, of astrology. Now, I think you can answer this in various dimensions. So in one dimension, we could say that our entire solar system is moving into is also evolving. So moving into a higher dimensionality frequencies, and we're receiving this on Earth. It's also said by Cryon, for people who listen to him and others, that people who are born now in this past 10 to 20 years are coming in even with a slightly different DNA and a higher consciousness. So in one sense, it's that we're drawn to that. We're naturally drawn to it because of that connection to the the higher frequencies of light. On a very mundane dimension, I think this sense of being, quote, maybe even you could say lost souls. We're looking for answers that we have not yet been given from the past. And I'm not a basher of anything. I don't like to make the past wrong, oh, we're terrible and we're greedy and this and that and the other. This is not part of my reality. That I look at it as we're in a time of evolution of consciousness, and that an aspect of what's evolving is the foundation from which we think, which of course is the work that came through me that I do with Alan, called Quantum Think, where you're thinking from a more expanded and up-to-date nature of reality than has been from the earlier 400 years of the industrial age. So let's say moving from the industrial age to the quantum age, that we have more knowledge. And we're looking for the wisdom, because the thinking, to, you know, the famous quote by Einstein, you know, the problems that we have cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created them. It really is that essence, where we're looking for a new way of thinking, another way of being. We're also, so I think in that dimension, which is connected, the worldly with the esoteric divine dimensions, that we want to get, we're truth seekers. We want to get at another level of truth. And that, again, astrology is one of the tools that people are intuiting now that will take us there. And so I think it's integrated at this point, where we're receiving the higher frequencies. So our consciousness is already going to a new level. We want to understand it better. So we're looking for the tools and the intelligence and, you know, the divine sciences to give us more accurate information. We're looking to quantum physics and quantum principles to also assist us in that. And it really is comes down to meaning and purpose, and how we can actually be the force, where we become the instruments of transformation, specifically to evolve consciousness in a way that we're in more conscious and deliberate creation, collaboratively with each other in the world, where we can transcend the tendencies, you know, just referring to what something Michael said. But it's not only that you have choice in, you know, choosing whether you're going to develop the predilections or not that come with the chart, but it's also that you can be in a transcendent state, an even higher evolutionary state, where you're not even affected by those tendencies in the chart. And so I think it's really a both and all of the above, why people are more interested in it now. And I think younger people, especially because of the questioning of meaning and purpose and the standard way that has always been, and trying to get to something new in the way of a truth of being.
Interesting, and CJ, I want to get your take on this too, but I do think it's kind of interesting, or maybe even just it's fascinating that we're living in a time where, in some respects, we have more opportunity to find answers faster and through a broader scope than maybe ever before, as far as we know. And yet this body of information and the study of science and mathematics that astrology is, that has been around, as we discussed earlier, for as long as we can see in recorded history. And that's the source that not the wise elders necessarily are beating the drum about and saying, no, kids, you got to look at astrology. It's those younger people that are saying, even with the ready access to things that we might think they would turn to instead. I just think it's very interesting. Very interesting that's there. CJ, anything to add to what Dianne was saying in terms of why you think it's so popular now?
I agree with both of you, what you said, but I'm going to add one other factor into this, more of a practical factor, because when I started astrology back in the 80s, my first class in astrology was how to do the math, and we had to do it by hand back there. There was a lot of interpolation, and that kept a lot of people out of astrology because they would just get turned off by the math. And nowadays we've got computers, so people don't have to know how to do the math and how to do that interpolation. The computers can do it for them. So that makes it a little bit easier for people to grasp it and get into it, maybe practice it, because they're dealing more with the interpretation, not the math side of it.
Oh, cool. So technology has also then played a role in making it more
A big
available.
role.
Yeah. Yeah. Neat. So I think another motivation that we've all sensed, certainly, and as Dianne, you were referencing in some of your earlier comments, we certainly are living in different times. I mean, there's no questioning that things are very different in many places on the planet, certainly where this show originates from in the United States. I think people sometimes want to point to parts of our history as a nation that might be similar, but I don't think so personally. I think we're in a very different time, and I think we're in different times across the planet. And so we wanted to talk to you about, are there correlates that might be helpful that we can kind of use astrology to help guide us, and if so, how? In terms of the sweeping changes that we're seeing globally.
Well, it's known that, and CJ and I have both written about this, and many, every astrologer has been talking about it for years, that we've had this, I think, unprecedented, as far as I know, CJ, set of planetary transitions, that the 4 outer planets all going into a new sign within a 15 or 16 month time frame. Now, as far as I've been listening to professional astrologers who have actually researched the history, and they say it's never actually happened before, at least they can't find an incidence of it. So when you look in the world, and this is why I think it's so important, and then of course you can look into what are the actual, as I said in one of my articles, the famous question, and what does it mean to me? And I want everyone to go and read CJ's and my articles on the IFGT website, because we go more into detail about how these energies are playing out. But I think that it's important to see that this is it is an actual unprecedented time. And, one of the things that we could see in the detail of it is that we know that the United States is having its 250th birthday next year. And that this time frame that they call in astrology the Pluto return, which we don't have as individuals because Pluto has the longest cycles, the outermost planet. There are other planets, but let's just say the ones that we talk about. And so Pluto has a varied orbit. The orbit that with Pluto going in from Capricorn into Aquarius, which basically happened in November of 2024, last year, that this was a 248-year cycle. And so when you look at that cycle and you see that, I like to always have looked back at when Pluto went into Capricorn, because Capricorn rules systems and structures in society, corporations, governments, the structure of our body as well, Capricorn. And that it changed, it went into Capricorn in 2008. That was when Obama got elected, and then we had this great economic, quote, crisis. And stayed there for 16 years until it went into Aquarius last year. So what was happening during that time? And Pluto is called the planet of transformation, that it digs up what's under the surface to restructure, to make things better. So when you think of, I like to think of like, you know, a building or a house, you have to kind of dig up the structure so that you can either make it better. I like to always advise, you don't have to throw out. It doesn't mean you throw out the structure. In this case, the governmental structure that started 250 years ago, but you examine it to see what tweaks do we need to make? And this is true for each of us in our lives. So when we're in this great period of restructuring, and these energies are, they continue, okay? So planets come together in an aspect and they generate a quote, a new energy or a new cycle, but it doesn't go away when that planet leaves. It's underlying, so it's building, it's building. And anyway, it's like wave-like. The energy is wave-like. So it's not just disappearing, you know, it may go back into, right, the holographic universe, into the enfolded aspect of life. And the new energy is becoming more emergent, but the old energy is, or the previous, not old, is still there. So we're looking now, well, then what happens? Then all these planets change, and it's asking us now, okay, we're going into the new, and we need to be able to think in a new way that we can properly make the adjustments that are needed now at this unprecedented time called the Aquarian Age, the Age of Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. Now for the next 20 years until 2044, and Aquarius is known for, you know, shaking up the system. Uranus ruled what's unique, and it's ironic because it's like you bring your uniqueness to the collective, because Aquarius also is this glyph. It's the cherubs, let's say, serve, you know, with the water, serving humanity water, and the water represents consciousness. So it's like pouring the new consciousness into humanity, serving humanity. So being in service to one another, coming together, but bringing what's unique to you. So you don't lose your individuality to the collective to become a homogeneous stew of humanity. No, it's even more important for you to bring what's unique to you and make that part of serving humanity to go to the next level. So, oh my God, I went on and on here, but I just feel so, you know, really obviously passionately about this, to see that we're in this time. And I'll just say one other thing. I want to hear what you have to say about it, of course, CJ. That another thing that I'm very interested in is the financial structure and the economy and investments. And so I listen to a lot of quote financial experts, and we know that's changing too, right? Cryptocurrencies, and it was predicted a long time ago, and now the institutions and the people who make those decisions are coming in. But when you look, you can see astrologically, with Uranus was in Taurus for the last 7 years. It just changed into Gemini, and Taurus rules the financial systems, real estate, stocks, investments, and Scorpio has to do with that too. But and so you look at what was going on. We were restructuring. Uranus was shaking things up, right? The upheavals, and coming into this, where one of the main systems that is undergoing the restructuring is the financial system. So to me, just saying this, it's very interesting that I see people who have nothing to do with astrology, I don't think. I mean, who knows? I don't know them personally, you know, all the financial gurus and experts. And they're talking about it's a reflection of what the planets are telling us about the restructuring of society and of the institutions that we live in. And again, I want to emphasize for everyone that it's not about throw out the old and bring in the new. We really should be wise enough, bring our wisdom to this, and be able to assess what's still working, what needs to be tweaked, what needs adjusting, how do we ourselves fit into this as it's going on.
Okay, thanks, Diane, because I think you've certainly shown through several examples how the things that we're witnessing and observing in terms of pretty radical changes in several aspects of life and how our countries, nations, societies are functioning and the institutions that we have kind of relied on. A lot of that changing, and those are reflected. You can find reflections of that in the astrology, or I suspect you can think of it at the other side of the coin, that that the world is being is reflecting the astrology. Yeah, it's which side of the mirror. CJ, anything to add to this idea of how these two worlds, if you will, the cosmic
Sure.
world of astrology and the quote unquote real world, are dancing together?
Sure. It just so happens that this is what I'm writing about in
Okay.
my article for this month. But so one of the things, understanding astrology can help us understand the energies that we're in, like my colleague had just explained so eloquently. So, but one of the things I just want to point out that might help make it a little more practical is that right now we see Pluto and Uranus are in a trine pattern, and a trine in astrology is a very harmonious pattern. It's when two planets are working together, their energies are influencing one another in a positive way. And we haven't seen this pattern probably in the last 3,000 years. And what we have seen, and a lot of people, when they talk about Pluto and Uranus, they always talk about, oh, it's eruptions. Think of Pluto as volcanic energy, and Uranus energy is considered rebellious. And so everybody's going, oh, we're going to have all this rebellion and everything. But no, because it's in a trine. We're not going to see that at this time. If you go back, what we've seen, like 1896 to 1907, we saw Uranus and Pluto in a conjunction, which means they were right next to each other, on top of each other, so kind of supporting each other, egging each other's energies on. But we saw things like the women's suffrage movement come out of that period. In 1920 to 1937, we saw Uranus square Pluto. And you see one of the big things we saw during that period would be India's independence movement led by Gandhi. 1962 to 1970, Uranus conjunct Pluto. We had all types of revolutions going on in this country and around the world, but they were like the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the gay rights, environmental rights, those types of things were all being challenged, right, as in those eras. And then in 2007 and 2020, we had them in I can't remember if it's a conjunction or an opposition, I can't remember. And we had a lot of global uprisings around the world. And we saw here in the United States, we saw a lot of police brutality causing riots and uprising. And then we saw fighting for Indian rights and lands and environmental protests during this period. So that Pluto-Uranus energy, we're used to it being kind of disruptive and almost unexpected in some ways, and surprising in some ways. But we're going into a period where they're going to be in a trine. And so although Pluto and Uranus are still going to have their rebellious volcanic moments, but they're going to be working together and probably working in harmony. So we may not see as much disruption in a negative ways we've seen in the past. It might be a smoother transition into whatever this revolution is, what we're coming up into new. But as everything has a positive and a minus side, the other side I could see of this with Uranus ruling technology and Pluto ruling what's hidden underneath, you could see as, Uranus in Gemini is what Dianne was talking about, the new technologies and things coming out. It's going to accelerate that. And Pluto is what's underneath that, what's hidden. So, and right now what we're hearing is a lot of conversations about AI. Is it good or bad? Is it underneath? Are people trying to control us, not just through AI, but through the medias and all this stuff? So all this stuff is going to be coming through the forefront. So look for more of that as we go through these periods. But I don't think it's going to be, I think there's going to be kind of a softer revolution. I think we're going to change. I think we're going to see, like Dianne said, we're going to see changes in the governmental structures, financial structures. I think these things are probably up for conversations about how we want them to be in the future and what do we want as we move forward. But one of the things that I think is hopeful is that within the next 3 years, Pluto and Uranus are going to trine each other. They're going to be 6 times in the next 3 years. So we're going to have these energies peaking over the next 3 years. So if they're going to move apart, come out of that configuration, then they're going to come back together. So when they're apart, we might feel a little bit disruptions and things, but that's all right. That's a conversation and things that's going to come home. And then we're going to come back to, okay, let's move forward. This is what we're going to do, how we're going to move forward. And a trine, Eric, is when 2 planets are 120 degrees apart in the sky. Good question.
Okay, so what we really want to know is how can, or if you want to recommend as a should, how can we use the information? You've talked on the one hand that it's really not for predictions, although it kind of sort of sounds like it can be. But so I really am very curious to know, and I don't think I'm alone. How do you recommend that we use this information and integrate it with our day-to-day lives? And perhaps in your answers, either answer the question this way or mix in how you personally use astrology in your lives.
So when I was just talking about the aspects I was talking about at the world level, the world chart, those energies, and if you want to do, and if you want to look at them and how it impacts you, we have to look at where those aspects fall within your personal charts, right? To see how it's going to impact you or it's going to affect you. So that's one of the things I'd recommend if somebody's interested, they want to look at their own charts.
But what do you do with the information, CJ? If you, let's say, so I kind of have two thoughts approaching this subject. One is, if you have the information, what do you do with it, if anything, or do you just have it as information? And if you don't have it, how does that affect you? Because my assumption is that there are probably more of the 8 billion humans on the planet today that aren't regularly consulting astrological information and then applying it to their lives. And so somehow they're going on, even though apparently they're being affected by the astrology of the cosmos. So how do you recommend that people interact with this information, and how do you do it yourself?
I use it personally to know when to push forward and when to lay back, because sometimes you can try your hardest to get something initiated and it just doesn't work. And then if I look at the astrology, I'm going, oh, okay, it's just not time yet. So I know to pull back and pull my energies back until the time when it's to push forward. And I think that's one way you can use it. You can also use it to understand sometimes the emotional swings we go up and down, especially if you follow your moon. The moon, everybody knows about the moon affects your how you feel. So you can look at it that way. And I think Dianne mentioned it about finding our purpose and passion, and maybe what type, for younger people, I think I get a lot of questions about career paths. what can they do? And it's just kind of helps give them some direction. I can't tell them, oh, you got to go be a doctor, you got to go be this, but I can tell them you might be good in a health service field of some type, and then they can figure out what, you know, what that is for them. So I try to give them the energies that the types of situations they're going to be excelling, because some people might have a strong Scorpio aspect and they're going to be good in research positions. You know, some people might have a good technology. I've got a nephew, and he's in his chart, it shows he's great at data analysis, and that's where he just landed, data analysis. And so it shows it's where he's going to be great at it. Just depends, you know.
So it just occurred to me that in some respects, maybe, and forgive me if this just is too simplistic, but it sounds like kind of the way one might consult a weather forecast and to know, you know, should you take an umbrella today, or should you plan for having outdoor activities on the weekend? You know, is that kind of the tone?
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dianne,
You
more
know,
thoughts?
yeah, it's funny you brought that up, because I was thinking it's like having foresight. Okay, so it's not like, oh, it's, you know, everything CJ said about you feel the energies, or I do consult the planets when I'm choosing, you know, a day to do something. I can look at the future in the ephemeris, it's called, that shows you what the positions of the planets that day. But what I think is very important, getting back to this time we're in and just really trying to put this all together, not trying, but putting it all together, that when you have foresight from being able to read the energies of the time, then instead of waiting to get knocked over the head with it, right? The 2x4 over the head by the universe, or as I say, we're going to evolve. Is it going to be crisis awakening or conscious awakening? So we're here because we have an intent for conscious awakening. And the way that you can use astrology is very important in this, in that if I know in advance I'm going to have to restructure something, or for example, right now, and we didn't want to really talk about short-term things because we know this will be, you know, in posterity on the internet, but let's just say right now we are having 2 new moons in Virgo. Okay, so August 23rd at 0 degrees, and CJ referred to the houses being in the house system 0 to 30 degrees. So the last degree of that house, or the moon, you know, in that sign is 29 degrees. So August 23rd, 0 degrees, and September 21st, am I getting that date right? 29 degrees, Virgo. So it's not it's not totally unusual, but it's a little unusual, infrequent to have 2 new moons in the same sign. So when you look at, well, what is the universe telling us here on a practical level? Virgo rules practicality, right? We look at details, we get organized. It's like we're in a new time, the new is emerging. So if we know this in advance, well, how are we going to use our energy now? We're going to use it to make sure we're getting organized and setting ourselves up. There are other planetary things going on now too, you know, Jupiter and Cancer, getting ourselves comfortable, but setting up for the new. Then we've got Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. So it's the identity. It's the I am. Hi, I came into the world. First house itself. I am here. And I am. So those are the key words. So we're being asked to express ourselves in a new way. So based on what we have built ourselves to be until now. So when you look at how do you use this is how I use it. You look at, well, I'm going to have to go to a new place. Things are not going to stay exactly the way that they've always been. And again, crisis awakening or conscious awakening. You still may get some of those bops over the head, surprises, Uranus is going to come in and say, stir it up. But if you have some foresight, and I liked what you said, Ken, about it's like a weather report. We look, right? We were going on vacation and we looked up the forecast for the weather. It may not be exact. It's not an exact prediction, but we can get a sense of what it's going to be. So you look at these planetary energies and you look at the trends right now in the transits and what we're being asked to do and where to focus by divine source using the planets to focus us. That's how you use it. So if you know you have to be in some way new, if you know you have to restructure something in your life, you can do it in advance. And I think when this comes, so I use that again with our Quantum Think clients so that they know in advance what's coming up. And you can plan better for it. You can, especially now, as we're, the new is emerging and we're the forces that are bringing it about. So we want to be able to do that as consciously as possible, or consciously awake as possible in being able to be at choice with it. So we're given these clues by the energetic trends. And it's a tremendous help to be able to do that. So, and I'll just, quote from who's called the mother of astrology, Evangeline Adams. And she was an American astrologer, I think, in the 1920s. And she said, "The wise man heeds the planets, the fool obeys them." Right?
Great
It
quote.
always
Great quote.
comes back to that. We tune in, you can tune in yourself. You can go to an astrologer, which is highly recommended, at least, at least a couple of times a year, and learn a little bit about it. But if we're at all intuitive and if we have an intent to tune into the energies, as CJ was saying, you can feel don't fight if the energy of today, and there's a lot of inward reflection going on as the planets go retrograde. That's what it's asking us to do, go inward. It's not like you're not doing outside actions externally, but it's again a both and. But the trend, if you wake up on a day where you're just not feeling, like you're going to start your new business today, there's a reason for it. So astrology gives you a reason and you can feel it. And I think this is where it becomes of paramount importance now for each of us to really develop our to our higher consciousness, to evolve our consciousness, to be in sync with what the Institute for Global Transformation, what it's all about here. Because as we evolve, we clear the static on the radio of our being, and we're able to receive these, not only the light frequencies that maybe we can't really, put into words or interpret, but we can also feel the energetic trends and put ourselves in tune with it so that we know this is a great day, I'm going to start. And of course, if you check the planets, you can see it even better because it gives you the timing. But, you know, this is a day when I'm feeling like, you know, the energy is kind of sideways and I'm just going to do something else. How am I going to use my time in my work today? And how am I going to use my energy? So it becomes extremely practical and at a great depth of wisdom when you follow these energetic trends.
Yeah, this
Highly
is really inspiring. Go
thing.
ahead, CJ, please add.
So just one more thing, because Diane made me reminded me of this. Astrology also connects us, is our connection to the stars. By studying that, we really realize that they're really influencing us.
Yeah.
And that we have this connection, and that ties back to the Institute, because one of our tenets is the interconnectedness of all things. And so it helps us to see that.
Well, you guys just did a beautiful job of bringing in one of the other key points that we advertised we would cover. I really appreciate you doing that. And you've also been just like, I'm just intuitive hits are firing off as I'm listening to you. Small diversion to a what will sound like a shameless plug, but I was looking at my notes as you were talking, Diane, and then you hit on it. But just if people are wondering, well, how can I start accessing content if I don't already have sources? Go to our articles. The August article that Diane contributed talked about a couple of key things. One was the retrograde motions and what they can signify, and then how to use them. The notes I made was just to reflect and let go of that which no longer serves. Those were a couple of key points in the article. So I would say that, yeah, take a look at these articles, and then obviously there's, I think, an overwhelming amount of information that is available to us about astrology. And so I think these are trusted sources. Thank you very much. And start there. And then you can begin to explore some others. I know in my exploration, I found Pam Gregory, who I listen to quite often. She's well known on YouTube and has books, etc. And when I first found her, I thought the title of her show was speaking directly to me, because I came out of more of a corporate and science background, and the title of her channel is "You Don't Believe in Astrology, Do You?" So it was great to kind of chip away at that skepticism and open my mind to this. But one of the other key things that you really sparked me to kind of link, in addition to the things both of you said about how this coordinates with the larger work and mission and purpose of IFGT, is related also to a central part of our interests and work with talking about and communicating the ageless wisdom. And part of that does reflect through human civilizations throughout time, and many indigenous peoples that populated different parts of the earth doing similar things. And so it strikes me that this is part of living with nature. This is part of living with the larger universe. And just as one might try to read the winds or the angle of the sun for when to plant or when to hunt or something like that, this astrological information is a part of that larger living in the oneness of everything being interconnected. And you can then read that information and utilize it. And just because we live in a quote unquote modern time doesn't make it any less relevant. In fact, it may tie back to this idea of why is it seeing a rise in popularity, because there's something in us that says your answers can be helped here. You know, you don't have to look, as Alan shared a comment earlier about some influence being just the presence of social media and how much people, especially younger people, it seems, are relying on that. Well, that can be great in some respects, but it can also be very distorting and put you at odds with some of these energies. So I don't know, that's just how some of what you've been sharing hit me, and I hope that kind of helps others too that may not be as familiar with astrology as the two of you. And do you find that in your personal lives that they are more balanced and harmonious because of your use?
To answer your question, I think a very important aspect of this is to take what I refer to as the cosmic view, so that we don't get hung up in the transitoriness of what we see in the daily news, and we don't let that take us over, because we understand the bigger picture that's going on is really this conscious evolution of ourselves and of the planet, cosmos, who knows what else. But I think that you brought up a very important point there. So I wanted to just acknowledge Marianne Miller, and I want to acknowledge her, obviously, for founding this great organization, but also for inviting CJ and myself to do this new feature and write these, well, I don't know what you'd call it, a column, a blog, whatever they are, but to delve into writing from the standpoint of each of us and our relationship to astrological energetic knowledge for the IFGT newsletter. So I wanted to acknowledge and thank Marianne for that. I want to acknowledge my husband, who's on the advisory council of the IFGT, Alan Collins, I know he's on, for suggesting to you, Ken, that you have as guests CJ and myself. And I wanted to acknowledge you for doing always a wonderful, incredible host, as a host, just brilliantly bringing out the best in all your guests, and for inviting us and for hosting us on this, as you said, topic that we don't usually cover, but very glad we did. So thank you so much. And of course, everybody here and who's listening in the future, of course, we appreciate your listening, because without that, there is nothing. And to my colleague and collaborator in the stars, CJ Mulkerrin, thank you for all your amazing wisdom on this topic. I learned so much from you, as I did during this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Back at you, girl.
Well, thank you, Diane. That's wonderful, and I can see Marianne beaming and blushing. So, but really, this is all emanates from her vision and leadership, and this is one of the more recent ideas that she had and shared. But just if you like this, dig in more, because there's lots more where this came from. But I think it's great, and I think it's a joy to help be kind of a channel or a bridge to help bring this information to more people, because we are in such different times. But there is, I love that what'd you say it was? I'll paraphrase it, like learning through consciousness or crisis. And
Crisis awakening or conscious awakening.
yeah, no, that's great. I need to also, I need to find out if it's more or less painful. You seem to take a 2x4 over the head. Mine usually hits me between the eyes. So we'll have to see about that. But no, this has again been wonderful. The magic happened again, as I've learned to kind of rely on. I thank our audience for your interest, attending, participation, and those of you watching in the future, that this serves you the way that we intend. We know that when we put these programs out there, they're being done for reasons that we may not even be able to imagine, but at some point people run into them. We look at the views and whatnot, and we know that this is helping. So Marianne, please.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank all three of you and Alan and the rest of our administrative team for making the IFGT the unique organization that it is today. We've been here a little over 23 years now, and an organization that's all volunteers couldn't possibly last that long without such love and dedication that each of you show the organization and the teamwork that we have in creating new and different things for our community. So thank you all so very much.
Well, you made it a pleasure, Marianne. And we're not going anywhere, but it's nice always to share the love. So with that, once again, thank you, Dianne. Thank you, CJ. Alan, yes, for the genesis of the idea. And our audience members, always lovely to have you here participating, seeing you. And we will catch you next month. Thank you very much.